So being that today is Tu B'Av, we'll discuss a little bit the Gemara that talks about Tu B'Av. It's the Gemara Tענית, and I want to share some thoughts about it. It's interesting, Yontif, because what's it got to do? What is it? What's it got to do? What's the significance of it? What happened on this day? So the Gemara Tענית, the Mishnah, and Tענית Daf Chavav, and it says as follows. It's interesting. All 3 days from the summer that we discussed and we're discussing so far, the Hainu, Shavasa B'Tammuz, Tisha B'Av, Chamisha B'Av, all are in the same Mishnah. So they all connect with each other. But Pashtas, I mean, it's not for nothing that it's all in the same Mishnah. So let's see what it says. Reb Shimon Gamliel, this is Tענית Chavav Amud Beis. There were no holidays for the Yidden as great as Chamisha B'Av and Yom Kippurim. Shebehem b'nois Yisrael yotzes b'klei lovan she'ulin. They would borrow the daughters, the girls, would borrow white clothing from other people. Shlei levayish es misha ein loy, and they shouldn't embarrass those that didn't have. Kol hakilin tu'in and tvila, in case anybody was tameh. Before they would wear them, they would have to make sure that the clothing was tohar, and they would tevel them. And the girls of Yerushalayim would go out and dance in the vineyards. What would they say? Bachur would tell the boys, lift up your eyes and see what you're going to choose. Don't put your eyes on the beauty. Look for a mishpacha that has good yichus. Pasuk in Mishlei Shlomo HaMelech says that the chen is false and the beauty is emptiness. We shall look for is the isha that's yiras Hashem. That's praise. That should be something that you should praise. Isha yiras Hashem hitishalo. V'oimer tenula mipri yadeha v'yahalelua bashar maseha, and give to her from your ma'aseh yadayim, from your pri yadeha. And you'll be mahalal her, you'll praise her, b'she'or ma'aseha, all over the place, you'll praise her good deeds. V'cheinu oimer te'enu re'enu b'nais tzion b'melech shleima b'atar she'to le'imay b'yem chasanos b'yem simchas libay. The b'nais tzion are going to go out and see b'melech shleima. We know that She'ashirim is a conversation between Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And whenever it says shleima, it's referring to Melech Shahashalom Shaloi, Rashi says. The king that all peace belongs to him. That is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Shalom is a very interesting thing. Everything ends off with Shalom. Shemon Esrei ends off with Shalom. Shisha Siddur Mishnah ends off with Shalom. The Birkas Kehanim ends with Shalom. The Medrash mentions this in a lot of places, and the concept is because Shalom means that everything, 100% of everything is at peace. So if I'm at peace and you're not at peace, so that's not real peace. That's I have peace. If I have it and you don't, that means that we're not b'shalom. B'shalom, real shalom means that everybody, the entire world is at peace with everything. So that's not something that we're that we're used to, because everyone has some kind of issues, and the world has lots of issues. So that's not something that we're used to. The day of his chasun and the day of the joyfulness of his heart. And Simchas Liba is the day of building the Beis Hamikdash. Matan Torah, Rashi says, was Yom Kippurim. Shenitnu by Luchas HaAchraynos, the second Luchas that Moshe Rabbeinu brought down was on Yom Kippur. So that's B'yom Chasunasa is Matan Torah. B'yom Simchas Liba is Binyan Beis Hamikdash. Okay, that's what it says in the Mishnah. The Gemara explains. Let's find the Gemara. I believe it's around Daf Lamed. Lamed Amud Beis towards the bottom. I can understand why Yom Kippur is a great day, a great Jewish holiday, because it has Slicha and Mechila for Klal Yisrael, for all the Averis that we did from the previous year. And it's also the day that we got the second set of luchas, like we just said in the Mishnah. Ela Tu B'Av Mahi. What's Tu B'Av? What's the significance of Tu B'Av? Amr Yehuda Mashmol, Dr. Yehuda Mashmol, Yom Shehutru Shvatim Lavai Zebuzeh. It was the day that the Shvatim were allowed to marry into each other. What does that mean? Zok Rashi. The Rachmana Omar, the Torah says, Chol Bas Yereshes Nachla. Every daughter should yarshin that Nachla. Uksiv Lo Sosav Nachla Mimata Lamata. You're not allowed to transfer the Yerusha from one Shevet to another Shevet. So Klal Yisrael understood that to mean that you can't marry, that somebody from Shevet Ruvain can't marry into Shevet Shimon, and so on, because you have to hold on to that piece of property that you were given in Eretz Yisrael, and you can't transfer it to a different Shevet. And there are shilas about, what would happen if people did marry it, and that was a big part of the issue of Bnei Slavchad. Chamisha Asav, they allowed each other to marry into other families, so so to speak, there was a certain barrier that was not allowing them to marry certain people, and maybe, like in today's day and age, a person has a shidduch and he goes out with the girl, or even before he goes out with the girl, let's say he'll do Dar Yishorim and something won't work out. There's something that's going to get stuck, that's going to block him. Over here, there wouldn't be mishadach with somebody that was in a different shevet. It's like even though the person has alamailas, but they wouldn't be mishadach because it was the wrong shevet, It's like it was out of town, we don't do out of town shidduchim, right? But it was a shayla lalocha because it was a shayla about moving over the nachla, moving over the Yerusha of Eretz Yisrael. So on this day, they darshan. The Gemara says they darshan zeh davar shativa Hashem lebnei selavchad davar zeh lo yehei noyeg ela b'dor zeh. This that we don't move the nachla from one shevet to another. That's only in this generation of the dor boya oretz. But after that, then you're allowed to move from one nachla to another. Amr Rav Yosef, Amr Rav Nachman. Another reason for Tesvav Ba'av, Tu Ba'av. Yom Shehuta Shevet Binyamin, Love Bekal. It was the day when they allowed Shevet Binyamin to come back. So it's a very horrific story that the Navi tells us in the end of Sefer Shoftim. It's a big shaila in the Mefarshim there if it happened at that point, like towards the end of the story of the Shoftim, but Pashtus it happened. According to many Rishonim already, it happened in the beginning of Sefer Shoftim, and the stories are out of order in the Navi. But whatever the story was, that the Shevet Binyamin did something very horrible to a young woman, and after that, Klal Yisrael as a whole joined together and made a shvuah that they're no longer going to have anything to do with Shevet Binyamin, because after you did such a horrible thing to Bas Yisrael, so they killed her and other things before they killed her. So they made a shvuah that they're not going to have anything to do with Shevet Binyamin. They made a shvuah that they weren't going to marry them. They were excommunicated. So on this day they allowed Shevet Binyamin Lovai Bekal. They reaccepted, so to speak, Shevet Binyamin. The next thing, Shenemar v'ish Yisrael nishba b'mitzvah lemer ish mimenu leitim bita l'Binyamin leisha. My darsh, what was the drasha? It said a person from Klal Yisrael made a shvuah in mitzvah. That was where they had the milchama, and they said that nobody from here is allowed to give the daughter to anybody from Shevet Binyamin. My darsh, what did they darshan? Amarav mimenu v'loy mibanenu, from us but not from our sons. Okay. So Rashi miutu. The chsiv ish mimenu leitim bita l'Binyamin. Mimenu is a miut. Legazru elamehem of mibneim legazru. From that generation, but from the next generation following the story of Pilegish Begiva, then it was allowed. Then they were matir to marry into Shevet Binyamin. Amar Rabba Babachan Rabbi Yechon. A third reason, Yom Shekolu by Meisei Midbar was the day that the people from the Meisei Midbar stopped dying. The Omar Mar Achla Kolu Meisei Midbar Lahoya Dibur Moshe. We're very used to understanding that HaKadosh Baruch Hu communicated with Moshe Rabbeinu regularly on a daily basis all 40 years throughout the Midbar. Kol Zman, from the Chetem Meraglim till the Meisei Midbar stopped dying, not that there was no Ashras Hashchin on Moshe Rabbeinu, but it wasn't at the spitz level that it should have been. So once the Meisei Midbar stopped dying, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu went back to the original state of being, talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. Shenamar vayhikash atamu kol anshe milchama lamos v'yidaber Hashem elai. Elai haya hadibur. And it was after all the Anshe Melchama died, and Hashem spoke to me saying, Elai, Zak the Gemara, Elai haya hadibur. Dr. Rashi, I want to focus on this. I want to focus on all the things in the Gemara, but I want to focus on this specifically. Zak Rashi, the Tanya, we learned in a Braita, Kol Arbaim Shana Shayu B'Midbar. All 40 years, Klal Yisrael was in the Midbar. B'chol Erev Tisha B'Av Haya Karuz Yaitze. Every Erev Tisha B'Av they would make an announcement. V'Omer T'u Lachbar. Everyone would go out and dig a grave. Everybody will lie down in a grave, and they would sleep in it that night. Shema Yamas. And maybe he'll die, and then they'll dig it, they'll cover him over. And then the next day an announcement would go out that anybody who's alive can wake up and come out of the grave, and anybody who's dead can stay in there. Obviously we weren't inviting the dead people to come out, right? Yeah.
That's why today's 2 hours.
Yeah.
They realized that it was...
Yeah. So I want to talk about that in a minute. I just want to finish the Gemara first, then we'll see what's going on. Zok Rashi weiter. Anybody that was still alive would get up. Every year they would do this. In the 40th year they did the same thing. And then the next day when they made the announcement, everybody got up. Anybody that went in, they all came out. Once they saw this, they were all wondering. Maybe it wasn't the right day. Maybe we made a mistake in the calendar. They went to sleep in the Kvarim every night until Chamisha Osa. Once they saw the full moon, then they realized that they got the calendar right. They realized they got the right day of the month. And then they realized that the 40 years of this Gzera are now over. And they were kaveya that generation for that day as a yantif. Okay, I just want to mention a quick word over here. Bichlal, we spoke Tisha B'Av, what the Bechia, there was a Bechia Shalchinam, and that was Nikva Bechia Shaldiris, and that's what that's where this Torah and the Taurus of Tisha B'Av originated from, and that's the Hemshech HaMishnah really, that, as we spoke in Shavas B'Tammuz, that, if it calls man that there's no hope, then everything is over. If there's hope, there's that little spark of life that still exists, so then you could ignite that into a bigger flame. But if not, then it's all over. We spoke then that was the matzav of Harugei Beitar, as we're going to see in the Gemara now as well. But it's an interesting thing. The cheshbon over here is as follows. Tosfos goes through a cheshbon over here, the same thing, that even though they were punished that they would all die, but it says, Kol amem shanim lehayu meisem ele b'tisha b'av. U'b'chol tisha b'av hayu meisem chaf elef aleph. There were 21,000 people would die that day. So there was an exact cheshbon of how many people died each year, to be mashlam all the 40 years, how many people should die. So every year when people will lie down in these graves on Tisha B'Av, they would say, 1 second, it's not that all the Shishim Ribah that went out of Mitzrayim are going to die in one day. Over the course of 40 years, they all died on Tisha B'Av. So every Tisha B'Av, they would lie down in the grave and they would say, you know what, maybe this year it's not going to be me. Maybe this year it's going to be somebody else. Until the year that person actually got gechapt. Right? But then the problem was that the 40th year, that was the scariest time. Because they knew that the 40th year, this year is going to be when everybody has to be dead. By the end of this Tisha B'Av, everyone's going to have to be dead. So what happened was that they all went into the Kvarim and then they came out. So they couldn't say, most years they were able to say, oh, maybe it's not going to be me, maybe it'll be my neighbor, maybe it'll be somebody else. But when it's the last year, then they knew that everybody had to be dead. So then that was the scariest year because they thought l'chayra that everybody would die. But the pshat is like this: that year, because they were so afraid. That year, because they were so afraid that they were all going to die, so they made a huge atzeres tefillah, and they all cry their hearts out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they should live, and that they shouldn't die. And the Malbim explains in Tehillim, the pasuk says, if you look at Kapitel Kuf Zayin in Hoidu, for those that daven Nusach Svard, on Erev Shabbos, he said it before Erev Shabbos Mincha, so it says, Vayizaku, it's talking about the four people, the Abba Shatrichim Lahoidis, the four people that need to give Hoidah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A person who's sick and got better, a person who got out of jail, a person who traveled over the water, and a person who traveled the desert. By two of them, it says in the pasuk in Tehillim, Vayizaku with the Zion, and it says Hashem is Yoshiyim. Hashem will help them. And then there's another. By the other two, it says Vayitzaku Batzar Lahem, and Hashem is going to be Matzilem, not Yoshiyim, Yatzilem. Hashem will give them a Hatzalah. What's the difference between Yeshua and a Hatzalah, and what's the difference between Vayizaku and Vayitzaku? Yeah. So if a person has an issue, but it's not like such a major issue for him, there's a person that got a little cut, got a little splinter, it's uncomfortable, maybe he'll put on a Band-Aid, he'll put on some cream, right? But he's not going to make Atzeres Tefillah for it, The thing is like this, there's two ways that a person could daven. There's one way that a person could daven, it's not haphazard, but he's not putting his whole heart into it. Because he says, Mistama, the doctors are going to do a good job, Mistama, the lawyer will, he's the one that helped him get out of jail, right? So 90% you're davening, but 10% you're relying on the doctor. 90% you're davening, 10% you're relying on the lawyer. So that's Vayizaku. You're screaming out in tefillah, but it's not 100% screaming out in tefillah. And so Hashem is Yoshiyim. Hashem is going to give you a Yeshua. Hashem is going to help you. Hashem will give you what you need. Masha Ein Kain, the people that traveled the ocean, and the people that traveled in the desert, so there's nobody there to help them. Famous story with Rav Shimshon Pincus, I think it's one of the most well-known stories about him. That somebody Nebuch didn't have children, Gaman didn't have children, and he asked Rav Shimshon Pincus what to do. Rav Shimshon Pincus was an extraordinary Talmid Chacham, and he had a tremendous avodah. He was tremendous ovid. He spent many hours in avodas Hashem, and we could go on and on about all the gewaldige stories about him. But this is one of the stories he's most well known for. That he told this young man, he asked this young man if he ever davened, that he should have children. He said, what do you mean? I daven 3 times a day, that I should have children. He said, no. You daven your heart out? So he said, whatever, I daven, I with kavanah, I put my heart into it, He said, no, nothing doing. I'm going to show you what it means to daven your heart out. He drove him to the middle of the desert at 3 o'clock in the morning. Or maybe it was earlier, 1 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock at night. He lived in Ofakim. He lived in Ofakim, was like some shtetl, far out, not near anything, some little town in Eretz Yisrael. And he built it up. He made a huge matzav of Torah over there. And he drove this young man late at night. I think it was around midnight. He drove him out, in the middle of nowhere. And he says like this. He tells him, I'm going to pick you up in 2 hours. Now you're going to daven to Hashem. That you should have children. And okay, 2 hours later, Rav Shimshon Pincus comes, picks him up, and the guy tears down. The guy's crying, and he asks Rav Shimshon Pincus, what was the avoid over here? What was the pshat in this? So he says, listen, Kolzman, you're in shul and you're davening and this and that. You are davening, you may even be giving 95%, but here I'm showing you that you have to cry your heart at 110%. So that's Vayitzaku. And that's Mimtzukai Sehem Yatzilem. That's where you're going to have a Hatzalah, which is even greater than a Yeshua. Hatzalah means you're entirely extricated from your Torah. Yeshua means Hashem will help you, Hashem will take you out, Hashem will save you, right? But it doesn't come with that complete 100% detachment from the Torah like a Hatzalah is. That's so when it was the last year, so these people said, this is our last chance. We know we're all going to die. It's all over. It's all done. So then they went into the graves and they cried their hearts out like never before. And what does Rashi say? And Rashi says, Kevin Sharosh and Esmala Halavana Bachamisha Asa Veloy Meis Echad Mehem Yodu shechesh ben chodesh mechuven. They saw the moon. The moon is what gave them that hope. The moon is what gave them that chizik. The moon is what gave them that koyach to go weiter. As we know, Klal Yisrael is compared to the Levana, that the Levana has no light of its own, that the Levana is completely a reflection of the light of the sun, and it's a complete makabel. And and the moon gets bigger and smaller. I mean, the moon stays the same size, but you could only see it because depending on the rotation of where it's holding. But Klal Yisrael is the same way, and that's why we say Kiddush Levana. This is what we're supposed to think about, and we're mispalal to be memale pekimas halavana, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should fix the pekimas halavana, which is going to come about by the ultimate tikkun of everything. And we say David HaMelech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. David HaMelech is compared to the moon. Klal Yisrael goes through tzaras through all the generations. And, sometimes it looks like Klal Yisrael is in a very, very, very bad situation, right? Because sometimes the moon is completely not there. But just give it a couple of days, it's going to be there. Klal Yisrael is holding at the worst of the worst of the worst right now. This is Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the worst day for the Jews. Shtei halacha that a person who has the Din Torah with a guy should not do it in the 9 days because it has bad mazel. It's not a good time for the Jews. All kinds of tzaras, all kinds of churbanos, it's not a good thing. But then they looked up at the moon and they said, there's a milui halavana. This is what gives us koyach. This is what Klal Yisrael is all about. Klal Yisrael is all about moving forward. Klal Yisrael is all about moving on. Klal Yisrael is about moving on to the next thing. Think about all the things that are mentioned here in the Gemara about Tu B'Av. It's a very interesting concept. It's not pshat that they had a Yeshua from this Maisa. Pesach we celebrate Yitzias Mitzrayim. So Klal Yisrael was in a Shrekel Chamatzav in Mitzrayim, and Hashem took us out of there. It was a Gevaldige Nisim and Gevaldige Zachin that we came out of Mitzrayim. Over here, what's fascinating is, it wasn't a specific Nes that happened. Over here, what happened was, the Shvatim were now allowed to marry into each other. There was something that was withholding them that now became mutter. There was some kind of barrier, and there's some kind of boundary that was removed, that now Klal Yisrael will be able to get along easier. Klal Yisrael re-accepted Shevet Binyamin. Klal Yisrael now finished up the Gzeres Meisei Midbar, and now we could go into Eretz Yisrael, and now HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Mashra Shechinasei Al Moshe Rabbeinu once again. We're going back to our original state, the way it should be, into the world of Tikkun. And that's very much why, if you think about it, we're just 6 days away from Tisha B'Av. What is it that all of a sudden we're in such a terrible day, in such a terrible state, we sit on the floor and we mourn the Churban Beis Hamikdash, we mourn the destruction of all of the different destructions that Klal Yisrael went through all the years. And 6 days later, it's such a great yontiv like Yom Kippur and Chamish B'Av. The celebration is because we're going weiter. The celebration is, we're accepting. We went to accept other things. I wanted to go weiter to show some more things in the Gemara. Then I want to tell to something from the Shem Mishmah. We'll get to in a few minutes. Ula says, Yom shebitl Heshea ben Ela Pursidiyos shehoyshev Yerav Meravat al Adrachim shelayalu Yisrael Regel. We spoke earlier in the summer, the first half, that Yerav and Meravat placed Avodah Zaros and blocked off the roads and did not allow people to be Oil Regel to the Beis Hamikdash. Heshea ben Ela, although he was a Rasha, but he allowed people to go to both. You could choose, either you go to Beis Hamikdash or you could go to the Avodah Zarah of Meravat, but at least he gave the option of the Beis Hamikdash. Shlayali Yisrael Regel v'Amar Leizer Shir Tzuyali, you could go to whichever one you want. Zok Rashi Hashea ben Ela Rasha, he was a Rasha, Dechsev Ayaz Hara B'nei Hashem. He did bad, he did evil, he was a bad person. Rak like Kamalche Yisrael, and not as bad as the ones that were before him. He gave the option to choose to be boicher to go to the Beis Hamikdash as well. From the time of Yerovam till now, people were not allowed to go to the Beis Hamikdash, period. And the roads were blocked off, the roads were practically destroyed, and roads were only going to the Avodah Zaros, and he stopped that. Rav Masna Omar Yom Shenitnu Arugei Beit HaLekvura, which we spoke about on Shavuos B'Tammuz, And tiknu b'yavna atayv ha'meitav atayv shalei yisrichu v'meitav shenasnu l'kvura. Harugei beitav b'parkan hazaken. Rashi says the Gemara in Gittin, and then weiter. Rabbi Rav Yosef Tam B'Tavayim Shapaskum Luchres Etzom L'Marocha, the day that they stopped cutting wood for the Mizbeach, because they Rabbi Lezer Godlai Memei Chamisha Asu Ba'Ava Elach Tashush Koicha Shel Chamo Lehayu Karsan Etzom L'Marocha Lufi She'ein in Yevation. Okay, a whole story about the Mizbeach, which we'll leave for now. Let's talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim for half a minute. That what happened was by Yetzias Mitzrayim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought a tremendous or and tremendous Hisgalus Hashchina on that night of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And they left. But then, HaKadosh Baruch Hu basically dropped them off and told them, now you got to work on it. Right? There are times when we find it like that. L'mashal, we know the Gemara Nida says that the child learns Kol Torah Kula B'Me'imai, the child's born, as the child is being born, the malach hits him on his mouth. It's not over here, by the way. This has nothing to do with it. It's not true. And the malach hits him on his mouth, forgets what he's learning, and now it's his job to learn the whole Torah over again. What's the avoid over here? Pshat is that when you're al ken yazevish avsav besimai, right? Growing up as children, we live in our parents' homes, right? But we come to a point of maturity where we're able to live on our own. So it's very hard to part ways from your parents who raised you and gave you everything and plus, and hopefully spoiled you a little bit too, right? And now you're on your own, right? So it's very difficult for the parents. It's very difficult for the child. But the parents are very much besimcha because they know, A, it's the right thing for you, and B, this means that you're holding your own. So at times we find where HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives Klal Yisrael as a whole, or gives a person as a yachid, the opportunity to be able to show that he could hold his own. As we spoke many times from the Maral, that one of the biggest madregas that a person can attain is to be able to be independent and to be able to hold his own, and that shows real chayim. And that's the koyach that's able to be misgaber on the Meisei Midbar. And I'm not sure, but the last Gemara talks about that the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer, and this they realized was coming from the Levana. Mastama has a shayches, but I want to share something. I want to share something from the Shem Shmuel. What nechama is all about? What's the nechama? I know we already passed Shabbos Nachamu, but this is very much related to it. You have to have the hope. You have to hold on to that little last spark that's flickering. To once that goes out, we said that the whole Churban Klali. So let's get back to what we discussed by Arugei Beitar. Beitar was the last holdout, and they had a revolution against the Romans, and they were hoping that they would be Matzliach, and if they would be Matzliach, then Klal Yisrael has a future. But that's not what happened. Beitar was destroyed; they were all killed out. So any yid that was left, otherwise they said that was the last spark that went out. It's out. It's gone. There's no hope. It's over. There's no more Klal Yisrael. There's no future for Klal Yisrael. The pasuk says, "Nachmu Ami Yomer Lekechem Dabru Alevi Yerushalayim V'Kiru Eleha." So this is the Shem Shmuel Tafresh Ayin Zion. Brings from his father, the Avnei Nezer Zechenu Levracha, Behefresh Haben Vayikra El Moshe Levayikar El Bilam. What's the difference between when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Megal himself to Moshe Rabbeinu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Megal himself to Bilam? It's very much along the themes of Bilam as we've been discussing throughout. Shavayukra Perusha Leskarev Haloim. Vayukra means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was giving you an invitation to get close to him. Vayikar Hu Shahadibur Ba'elav. V'hainu Shamosh Rabbeinu Nis'ala L'kras Hadibur. Avo Bilam Nishar B'tinufa Kimikodim Le'nis'ala Klal. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to Moshe Rabbeinu lifts himself up, lifts his spirits, lifts himself up to go to the Shechina. Masha'enkin Bilam. Bilam, we spoke many times, is the Spitz level of Avodah Zarah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to him. He doesn't lift himself out of the dirt. The Yesod of Tu B'Av and the Yesod of what Yidden are is no matter who, no matter how low they fall, no matter how shvach they're holding, there's always an opportunity to get back up and go weiter. What do you think the Yidden were thinking on the 10th day of Av, the day after they got out of the grapes for the final time? They're like, oh my gosh, it's so interesting. We know we're going to live. Now they come out, had a havtocha that they were going to live. Think about what that feels like, right? In contrast to the feeling for the last 40 years, what they were thinking, who says I'm going to live another few more days? They had a new lease on life entirely different musik hachayim, entirely different outlook on life. You bet that they were going to make sure that they weren't going to misbehave again, right? Brings from Chazal that a Mitzayra, we don't want to have anything to do with him. So if he asks for something, we got to just throw it out the window, dump it on him, we're not going to communicate with him. Says when Klal Yisrael is in Golus, their hearts are very closed up. And they don't even have the koyach to listen and to hear the words of Nechama. Like the pasuk says, when Klal Yisrael was in Mitzrayim, they weren't able to listen to Moshe Rabbeinu from the shortness of breath. They didn't have the kalim to listen to the Divrei Nechama. Yeah? I mean, we all know the stories about the people in the concentration camps when the Americans came to liberate them. Like they were so shvach and they were so knocked out and their spirits were so destroyed that they were so thin in the Mesha and everything, like we're supposed to live, like how we're supposed to live, They got the new lease on life. They were able to walk out. They were able to be free now. But what? They couldn't do anything. They were so weak. They were so shvach. They had nowhere to go, right? So sometimes the nechama, sometimes even hearing the nechama is not enough. That's why the pasuk says you should call out. Klal Yisrael always has to know. This is Sai as a Yochid and Sai as a Tzibor. Every single person has to know this. That when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is calling out to us to be menachem us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is expecting us that we have to raise ourselves up just a little bit more. This is the Iker command that the Nevi'im are telling Klal Yisrael to be consoled and to be comforted. The Nevi'im have to talk so passionately and to deliver such an important message in a way that Klal Yisrael is not just going to hear it, oh, it's a nice, imagine I tell you, I have some idea, I want to go into business, I have some nice idea, yeah. I tell you, and you're going to laugh at me, yeah, one of these other flops of businesses or whatever. It'll take off, you'll make $5,000 a year, big deal. But if I tell you such an idea and it sounds so interesting, and it sounds like, oh, this is mamish what I need. And everybody else that was giving me ideas, it was all hot air. It was all nothing. It didn't add up to anything. So it's all very nice. People tried. People meant well. People had the right intentions, but it didn't get us to where we needed to get to. It didn't push us in the right direction of what Klal Yisrael needed. So that's what the job of the Nevi'im was. This is what the Navi Yeshaya is telling us. Nachmu nachmu ami. The pasuk says, why does it say nachmu nachmu ami? What does the pasuk say in Eicha? Eini yor damayim. Double. First Beis HaMikdash, second Beis HaMikdash. Nachmu nachmu ami. There were loks of b'keflayim. They got punished b'keflayim, and they're misnachem b'keflayim, and they have a double nechama. What's the double nechama? Hainu guf ha-nechama, the actual nechama that you're going to be comforted. V'ahechsher l'kabel ha-nechama. Many times we don't have the kalim to be able to be mekabel the nechama. The Gemara says in Brachas that a person should not try to be mefayez somebody b'shas kasai. While a person is angry, don't try to talk him out of it, because it's not going to work. When a person's enraged, he totally loses his mind, and he's nuts. Kipshuta. He lost his mind. He lost his marbles. He's gone. Right? You wait an hour, you wait a day, you're able to talk to him. He'll have charata too, don't worry. Right? So right now, he doesn't have the kalim to be makabel what you want to say. Also, a person should not try to be mafai somebody when he's angry. When a person's in the tsar, unless you're going to jump into the tsar with him, don't be mafayis him. Being mafayis him, try to make him feel better, that's not going to work. He needs you if you decide to enter in with him, you have to be there together with him, not try to schlep him out. You have to be there in the tzar with him 100%. That might be able to give him the kalim to be able to hit a different nechama. So Klal Yisrael looked up and they saw the moon. And they said, we weren't tight in the cheshbon. That when they saw the moon, that was the creating the kalim, so to speak, with which they're able to be makabel the nechama. Because till then they were so geschrocken, they were so shaken up. I don't know if I'm ever going to make it. It's one thing on the previous years you could always blame it on the other people and say, oh, you know what, this year it's not going to be me, it's going to be somebody else. You could always shift it onto somebody else. But the last year, that was when they were mama shaken up, because they said that that's when it's going to be me. Everybody knew that it was going to be them. But guess what? The tables were turned entirely, and not only was it that the neighbors didn't die, but they themselves didn't die, and they were zeicha to a new chayim. So it's not the pshat that it's like a random thing that you have Shavas B'Tam, you have the 3 weeks, and you have Shavas B'Tam in the beginning, and ends with Tisha B'Av, and then 6 days of Chayis and Shvos, and then Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av is the culmination of the Nechama. It's directly connected to Tisha B'Av. It's a hemshich, so to speak, that as low as a person can fall, and as desperate as a person is, there is always a nechama for him, and there's always going to be a Yeshua for him. There's always going to be a Hatzalah for him. The only thing that we have to do is to look up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and just daven and to pour out our hearts to the Rebbeinu Shalom, to the Kol Yochel, and He'll save us. I just want to end off with a bracha that we should be Zeicha, Tashiveinu, Hashem, Eilecha v'Nashuva, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem, and we should no longer know of any tzaris, of any tzar, and everyone should have a Yeshua, a personal Yeshua, and everyone should have a Yeshua Pratis, and Klal Yisrael should have a Yeshua Klalis. All right. Hatzlucha. Sei gesund.